Keith Thurman is back after 22 months out with a majority decision over Jose Cito Lopez, defending his super WBA welterweight title. I thought the majority decision was too much. I could only really give Lopez 3 rounds. He was very game, he kept the pressure on, but he didn't land consistently enough. Thurman, with really using his feet and reactions most of the time, was able to pick him off and land his eye-catching but not always the most powerful shots. Now, considering 22 months out, a problem with his hand and his elbow, he did very well. But it was apparent again, the nickname of one time isn't the most apt. Really, since he stepped up to the higher level, was it when he first went the distance with Leonard Bundo, or went 12 for the first time, his power has often been lacking. He certainly isn't that lights out guy he would like to think of himself as, that his nickname says he is, because he winds up those shots. And yes, he did floor Lopez in the second round. And yes, some of the shots looked good or sounded decent, but he really wasn't deterring him for the rest of the fight. He bloodied his nose, he had him marked up, he was winding up. Good shots to the body, good shots to the head, but Lopez just kept coming forward very gamely. And then in the 7th round, gets a admittedly rusty Thurman into all kinds of trouble, finding his head worryingly easy to hit and backing him up. Now, even a really good fighter, great fighters, being hurt or floored, it doesn't always mean the most, even to slightly lesser opponents. It's more the fact that when Thurman does get hurt, he goes into being the hunted. He starts backing up, he almost starts running back, and his coping mechanisms for these crisis situations aren't the best. He doesn't really clinch, he kind of just looks through his guard and then waits to wing away with a power shot to try and walk you onto it. It's not the most, a fail-safe type of plan, and he doesn't really have the kind of jab that tries to control you. He just pops you with it and mainly uses it to try and load up again with the big shots. He doesn't have that steady controlling jab that you need to try and settle a fighter down who's getting a bit tasty, grab him, do whatever you can to try and get him walking through the mud again. He didn't do that. You see similar, maybe inbuilt flaws that he's got that certainly wouldn't do him any favours against the likes of an Errol Spence, very physically big. You could see Lopez isn't really that big a welterweight. There was a bit of fat around the waist, whereas Thurman's more of a unit at the weight, whereas Spence is massive at the weight, cuts off the ring nice. As we know, goes to the body very viciously. It's not hard to imagine him beating Thurman, particularly at this time. But it's not even about just Spence now. We're talking Manny Pacquiao, an older Manny Pacquiao, who perhaps, when Thurman won his unification fight against Garcia in early 2017, I believe, things were looking different then. I think most people would have favoured Thurman then. But now, Pacquiao not looking so bad against Broner. A lot of people think the aged Philippine could take him, and I can't really argue too much. He's still got a style and still pretty vicious for a 40-year-old. And Thurman would love the fight because of the amount of money it would make, but that is a tough one. If he can fit that in, he'll happily take that. That's a tough one to call, though. Yes, it is his first fight back, so we do have to give him a bit of slack. We can go on the understanding he is going to be better for his second one. Surely, he is going to be. He was fading for the last 6 rounds. He didn't have the stamina. That's understandable. But I think ultimately his main plan is to try and get that rematch with Sean Porter, get that WBC back, and then throw it into the mix of him being better to sell. And he's already said something again about Spence, like, let's try and make it a 2 or a 3 belt fight. Again, he always sounds a bit reticent when it comes to Errol Spence. Who knows? Maybe he will fight Manny Pacquiao later this year. Will he fight another twice this year? I reckon Thurman might just fight another one time, if you'll pardon the pun, this year. But ultimately, got to cut him some slack for him getting hurt. He's going to look better next time. It's ultimately just good to see him back in the picture.